The following podcast is brought to you by the Johners Podcasting Network, found exclusively at WrestlingWithJohners.com. Hello and good evening. I think it's Tuesday evening, I'm not quite sure, but this is episode 294. And what better way to start Tuesday evening with an awesome guest, one of the best independent pro wrestlers on the UK circuit, possibly any circuit you can shake a stick at, none other than NIWA. NIWA, thank you so much for coming on the Wrestling with Johners podcast. How you doing, my friend?
Thanks for having me on, mate. I'm not too bad. I don't know about best, but
wow,
I appreciate it.
I think many people would agree with myself there. Certainly the people that I've spoken to have described you as one of the best independent pro wrestlers on the UK scene, certainly. And I think hopefully by the end of this interview, we'll kind of get to understand a bit more why. But it's my job, NIWA, to kind of big you up and to promote you, of course. I wouldn't be doing my job otherwise, but awesome to have you on the show. And for anybody at home that wants to get in touch with the show, wants to get in touch with NIWA, send us your questions, send us your comments, you can do. Simply send them through to us using your chosen device. They'll ping through to us, and we'll do our very best during the course of this interview to bring them up live on screen. But for any of my listeners at home that might be interested in supporting your favorite content creators and possibly supporting me, Wrestling with Johners, I have a Patreon. So please go to patreon.com/JohnersPod. That's patreon.com/JohnersPod, where you can see exclusive behind the scenes content, exclusive interviews. I've recently put up some bloopers from some shows that I've been at, from some of my backstage interviews that didn't go well on the first take, but lots of exclusive stuff up there, including my Legends Masterclass. So please go and check that out. From as little as £3, for as little as the price of a cup of coffee, you can support me as one of your favorite content creators over on Patreon. And don't forget to check out my most recent interview with Ace Matthews, episode 293, doing some great things up north for promotions like True Grit, Tidal Championship Wrestling, and 1PW. Ace Matthews, what a fantastic guest he was. A really inspirational and motivational chat that I had with him last week. But NIWA, we've had the pleasure of bumping into one another a couple of times this year already. Once in Cheltenham at WPW Super Clash, and more recently in Tewkesbury for Southwest Wrestling. But I've got to say, everything I've seen you were in championship matches on both of them occasions as well. But 2023 hasn't been too bad for you so far, has it, my friend?
It's been really good because before COVID, I felt like it was sort of a similar feeling to what it feels like now, whereas it was sort of slowly just moving up. And then COVID hit, and then I went back home to New Zealand, and then I came back here last year. And for the first like sort of 4 or 5 months, it felt like, I don't know, I just felt like I needed to get back into my groove, I guess. And then this year, February, it's sort of the same feeling I had before COVID, where everything's sort of moving up again. So it's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going to bring up some pictures here. And I think this was the first time that we bumped into one another at the amazing,
Well, was that the
Cheltenham Town Hall?
I think I said it to you at Cheltenham, but was that the first time we've ever met, or?
I believe so, yeah. We may have conversed once or twice via Messenger, but yeah, absolutely. And there you are. I think after the match, with the championship out, but of course, it was MVK that walked away the victor that time. And more recently in Tewkesbury, a couple of Saturdays ago.
There we go.
There we go. What a fantastic entrance, and what a great match you had against Chris Bronson. And a question that came through before we went live, NIWA, and a fan of yours that was at the Cheltenham Town Hall in February asking, what did it feel like to be in the ring with somebody like MVK, somebody very powerful, very dominant? Don't know if you've ever faced him before that match.
First time I've wrestled him, first time I met him as well. Just pretty intense guy. I mean, I feel like I'm pretty intense in the ring. That's probably my like calling card, I guess. But he was sort of, he was on par with me, I guess, in terms of intensity, and he's really quick as well. And for a big guy, he moves around a lot. So, because he's bigger than me, So, I mean, he moved. I wasn't expecting that when I met him, because I met him and he was, I don't know how tall he is, maybe 6'2" or something, and he's quite a muscly dude as well. So I wasn't expecting him to fly around as much as he was. But
Yeah. And
I'd heard that he was a high flyer and stuff before I wrestled him, but I just wasn't expecting that. I mean, yeah, he's really
yeah.
intense.
Absolutely. Quite surprising when you do see him in the ring, how agile he is, how big and powerful, strong
For
and
his
fast. He's
size,
kind of
yeah.
like, yeah, the total package. But you two absolutely knocked out of the park that day in the main event.
Thank you.
And your match against Chris Bronson in Tewkesbury for Southwest Wrestling, another
Yeah, yeah.
awesome match. And the thing with Chris Bronson is, I don't think he's been in the business that long,
He
but
was,
he
yeah, he was
way the
telling me four
competition.
4 years.
Yeah,
So 4 years in wrestling. That was a physical match. That was the kind of match that I like, you know. That's sort of just my style of wrestling, I guess. So that was a good night.
yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Darren Ewan, who sent in that question. And more recently, Niwa, you've had a busy weekend. I think you were wrestling for All Star in St Albans on
St. Albans,
Saturday,
yeah,
and
Saturday night.
Sunday you was just down the road from me in Frome, the cheese and grain for
First
CSF. Um,
first show for CSF.
Debut, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
But tell us about your busy weekend anyway.
So Saturday was St. Albans. I wrestled Charlie Sterling. Um, third time I've ever wrestled him. So I wrestled him before COVID, and then I wrestled him recently in Telford, which was probably one of the best matches of my career, I think. Um, the crowd was just electric. I mean, because you don't get that every night. You go out to wrestle, and you don't know how the crowd's going to be. But I didn't know they were going to be that crazy. But we just went out there, and they were nuts. And so I had one of the best matches I think of my career with Charlie Sterling. And then I wrestled him again in St. Albans, and then I did the main event as well in St. Albans, which was an 8-man tag. And then Sunday
Yeah. I mean,
was
look at this first of all. Look at that menacing foursome there, and I think that's the henchman, isn't it? I definitely
yeah,
recognise
yeah.
Big Jim on the left
Big
there, yourself
Jim,
next to
Bent on
him.
Destruction, and Mickey Long
Yes,
there, the one punch machine
absolutely.
gun.
And these were your foes. Obviously, we got Joel and Charlie in the middle there. Just remind us of the tag team on either side there. I'm guessing they're
So
the
on the
All Star Tag
left,
Team champions.
his name is Chrissy Decker,
Yeah.
and then on the right, his name is Tommy Tango. I think I'm pretty sure that's his name.
Awesome, awesome. But
Yeah,
I mean, that was for All Star, and
yeah,
like, so you've got a bit of a history with All Star Wrestling. I think you probably started wrestling for them or with them before the pandemic.
yeah.
And like I say, I mean, how do you find wrestling for a company like All Star? Because they've got this long history, this lineage, 50 plus years they've been going now, touring around the UK, and popular kind of seaside summer holiday and school holiday touring brand as well. But to get to work for a company like that must be pretty good, not just because of the reps, but because of the fun and the experience that you have while you're out and about with the boys.
It's my favorite place I've ever wrestled. So yeah, I first wrestled there. I think it was 2019, or it might have been. No, it was 2019. I think it was sort of mid to late 2019. So I was wrestling for WAW on the holiday camps, and I met a wrestler named Brody Steele, and I wrestled him probably like 15 or 20 times on the camps, and he was just impressed with me, and he sort of put me forward to Brian, and so the Knights put me forward to Brian as well, and then I did a few camps for Brian, and then that didn't really go anywhere though, so I did a few camps for him, and then I didn't really hear too much back from him, and then I wrestled Joel Redmond on an Evolution show in Gloucester. And I think he was impressed with me, so he put me forward to Brian, and then it started rolling from there. So
Yeah.
late 2019, I think, was when I really started working there.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
how do you find it with the reps? And especially, I mean, you mentioned WAW as well. They do their own kind of
yeah, yeah.
summer season and their own tour. But sometimes, and I've spoken to talent on here, you could be wrestling maybe 14, 15 times in a week, a couple
Mm,
of 3 times in a day, sometimes
yeah, yeah.
putting up the ring, taking it down, going to another venue. How do you find that grind? How do you enjoy it?
I no, I love that. That's like my favorite part of wrestling. I'm always like I always want to wrestle as much as I can, as much as possible. So if I can do it 3 times a day, that's great for me. Um, but I love the reps, and I just love all the wrestlers that wrestle there and stuff. I mean, I learnt the most I ever have from wrestling guys like James Mason and Joel Redman and Dean Allmark, and I got pretty much go on really. I mean, some guys come and go from All Star, but pretty much all the time there's just great workers there. So it's really good to learn, and like I said, I learned the most there. So and that's where I felt
Absolutely.
like I started getting better and just started learning what I do well, and I think those guys sort of understood what I did and helped me get to the next
Yeah.
level, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, I skipped ahead a little bit there, but we mentioned your debut for CSF on Sunday at the Cheese and Grain in Frome,
Yeah.
which is literally a stone's throw away from where I live. And I mean, I'm quite intrigued because it was your first match for a new promotion. Obviously, when you go
Yeah.
there, there's going to be a lot of familiar faces backstage. It's going to be a lot of the guys that you've kind of worked with and known for many years. But an experienced pro like yourself, Niwa, when you debut for a new company, is that still very special for you, or do you kind of have butterflies? Where's your mind at, and where's your emotions when you kind of wrestle for the first time
It's
for a new promotion?
I'm not nervous or here we go. Joel Redman here.
Hey, Joel, Mr. Redman, how you doing?
It's not. What was the question again? Sorry, mate.
Yeah, just kind of debuting for a new promotion.
Oh
Where's
yeah,
your
yeah.
mind at? Even with your experience, how does it feel?
I guess you have to kind of go in with confidence. So I'm excited. I'm not really. I wouldn't say I'm nervous, but just obviously you want to set a good impression though as well. So I just go in with the same sort of focus I guess I have for every match, is just give it 100% and just pretty much just show everyone who I am, I guess, sort of thing, you know.
Absolutely. And being as we saw the wonderful Joel Redman there, you are, I mean, just tell us exactly where you are. You're at the All-Star
So
South
yeah, I'm
Training
at the
School,
All
aren't you?
Star South Wrestling School now. Yeah, I'm down here about, if I can get down here 3 or 4 times a week. So and Joel's made me a trainer now. So on Tuesday nights I'll take training with Bullet. So it's going really well at the moment.
Congratulations. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
congratulations. So I've got a few pictures to bring up here, and of course, this is the flyer that a lot of you probably will have seen with Joel there, first ever WWE NXT Tag Team Champion, alongside Pac, or Adrian Neville as he was known there, but based in Salisbury, and like I say, a wonderful training school, which I believe NIWA has only recently opened. Is that correct, or just give us the facts
Ye-
there? Is it new?
Probably, yeah, probably 2 months ago maybe. So and we were, well, I guess it's been open for a while really. I mean it was, we were just doing it out of like a gym that had a spare room, and we were just wrestling on the mats for, I think they were doing it in 2021 maybe or something. But when I got back here, we were wrestling on the mats, and that was probably for about 6 or 8 months. And then Joel found a unit, and we just moved in here like 2 months ago. So it's
Yeah,
going really well.
absolutely.
With 4 classes a week, beginners, mixed, intermediate, advanced. But yeah, so it's
Absolutely.
going
And
really
you
well.
mentioned some of the coaches there. And obviously, we've got Joel, top right, who's like the head coach, Bullet, bottom left. Everybody boo Bullet. Boo. But saw Bullet on Sunday. The wonderful heavy metal progress show from the ballroom. Absolutely fantastic. And he cut an awesome promo as well. But Bullet is the intermediate coach, I believe, for the beginners there. And then yourself, bottom right. So what's your class at NIWA?
It's more of a mixed class. It was sort of, yeah, I think it's always been a mixed class actually. Yeah, it's more of a mix. So sort of beginners, intermediate, and advanced. So everyone can come along to that. And it's we don't do a lot of conditioning or anything like that. It's just a bit of a warm up, and then just work on sort of basics and uh, just a mix of things really. It just depends who's really there. I mean, if there's more beginners, we'll work on a lot more basic things, or if there's more advanced guys, we'll go into more advanced things. So it just really depends who's there. But yeah, so it's two. Most classes are 2 hours. On a Saturday it's three. But yeah, it's been really fun. I've never really
Absolutely.
done that sort of thing before. I mean, when I went back to New Zealand, I taught a few classes, but it's not really my thing, I guess. But I've just sort of fallen into it, and it's going really well.
But you're enjoying it, more importantly.
Yeah, I really am enjoying it. Um, I mean, I like learning, so I still feel like I'm a student, you know. But I guess if Joel thinks I'm good enough to take one of the classes, then I'll do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I've heard nothing but good things, and a few other pictures here of some of the classes, and I think that's the British legend Doug Williams in the centre there, alongside Bullets, and I think you are on the far right there,
Far
but
left.
far left. But so a good crop of young talent there. And once again, another British legend, James Mason, came down for a training session there. But you know, you appear to have a fantastic crop of recruits as well, and some that are working the circuit up and down the country, some for All Star, some for Southwest Wrestling, some kind of in various promotions around the UK. But it's a very exciting crop of young talent that you guys are working with there at All Star South, isn't it?
Definitely. We've even got a guy over in Japan now, Ripper Reed. That was
Yes.
through All Star South. Yeah, and we've got guys like Nathan Angel, Brandon Lee, all these young guys that just sort of. I think Brandon Lee's got 2 years experience, but now he's getting out on the shows. Nathan Angel, he's been wrestling for probably not even 10 months,
Yeah.
and he's out. He's out. I mean, I think he's already had about 50 or so matches, in 9 months. So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, I guess, that comes from the school through Joel and. Like you said, but there's also beginners. So it's just a massive class, really. I mean, there's advanced guys that are doing shows. There's beginners that have never even stepped in a ring before. So it's got everything, really.
Yeah, and I had the honour of seeing Nathan Angel work for the first time in Tewkesbury a couple of Saturdays
Yeah,
ago
yeah.
for SWW against Yeston
Yeston Reese,
Reese.
wasn't it? Yeah.
And what I think it opened the show, and it was an incredible match. You
Phenomenal.
wouldn't know that Nathan Angel was still relatively new to the business. He
Not at
really
all.
knocked it out of the park against another veteran in Yeston.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's got a great look, Nathan Angel, and he's doing really well in the ring as well. I think he'll really go far in wrestling.
Absolutely,
He's really
absolutely.
young too. He's only 19, so
Yeah,
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah,
He's got a great
crazy.
look. He's got amazing hair, which I am desperately jealous of because I've never had hair.
You've got good hair though, haven't you?
No, nothing there at all, NIWA.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that was a rib or what, but
That was a rib. That
maybe
was
on
a
my
rib.
back, but certainly not on my head. But you've got on Saturday. It's coming Saturday the 29th. You've got an open day at the Salisbury All-Star South Training School, which is where you are right now. You've got an open day. Now, fill us in on the details. I believe that anybody can register to be a part of that day. But what information do you have? How can they apply? How can they get down there?
Free, yeah. So it's a free open day for anyone
Wow.
that wants to come down. So, um, yeah. I mean, if you contact All Star South on Facebook, Instagram, if you message Joel on Facebook or Instagram, I'm sure you can get some more details. But yeah, this Saturday, the 29th, it's a free open day, so it'll be pretty cool. I reckon there'll be a lot of people down here. So
Absolutely. And from what I've been told, the information I have that it's a 4-hour training session from
yeah,
9 till 1. And Eddie Ryan is going to be there
Eddie
as
Ryan
a
will be
special
there.
coach
Yep.
to help you guys out on the day and to support anybody that walks through the door.
You're going to be there, aren't you?
I'm going to be there as well. I'm
There
going
we
to
go.
be there saying hi to whoever comes through the door and maybe do a few interviews and to take some pictures and some video. But I do have an email address as well. And NIWA quite rightly said, just message Joel or message the various Facebook groups associated with All Star South. But the email address, if you want to inquire, just get more information or to possibly register your interest for this free open day on Saturday the 29th, just email wrestling.salisbury@outlook.com. That's wrestling.salisbury@outlook.com. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the flyer actually has the email address just on there. Here we go, wrestling.salisbury@outlook.com. And there is a telephone number there as well. So take a screenshot of this slide and all the contact details are in there. And I'll try and put them in the description to this podcast as well, to this show as well. But now, NIWA, when we messaged each other this morning, you suggested that you might be able to take us on maybe a little bit of a guided tour of the training facility. So tell us.
Should do that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Yeah. No worries.
So this is an exclusive to those watching at home on the Wrestling with Jonas podcast. And I'm going to let NIWA give us a little bit of a tour. And there's a session actually happening as we speak. So this is pretty special.
Ready to do a bit of a tour, Joel? Or... Yeah.
Hey, Joel.
Here it is. A few posters up there.
Looks amazing.
There's a class going on at the moment, so
That's fantastic.
Bullet taking the class.
Who's in the ring at the moment? Is that Nathan
So
Angel at the back there?
we got Bullet, Nathan Angel, Lewis Bash, and then we've got a couple beginners there as well. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, and I can't wait to see the facility with my own eyes.
Big poster with James Mason there.
Oh, British legend. I will be getting James on the show sometime soon. We're negotiating dates, but that will happen.
Quite a few cool posters around there.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Old school ones up there.
But look, say just to register your interest to get down there in this free open day with some of the best wrestling coaches in the UK, Joel Redman, NIWA, Bullet, and Eddie Ryan's going to be there for a free 4-hour session from 9 a.m. to 1, free of charge, absolutely free. You can't make it up, but they really want to kind of grow their base of new recruits and talent in the South. And what better way, if you're a wrestling fan, or if you've ever wanted to get involved in a business, if you've ever wanted to try your hand, or just have a roll around in the ring, or to be around some of the best coaches in the UK, then just go to wrestling.salisbury@outlook.com, or get in touch with All Star South, or get in touch with Joel or NIWA, and they'll be able to give you all the information you need to get down there on Saturday the 29th, this coming Saturday, from 9 till 1.
Obviously, can I just say, obviously,
yeah, go ahead.
He's one of my best mates, Joel, but you can't really get anything better than the school, I think, just because the experience. I mean, I've learned so much from Joel, and you got guys like James down here and Doug, and I mean, we got other, more seminars lined up as well with other British legends. So
yeah,
it's a place to be, I think.
100%. Yeah. If you've ever had a desire, and is there an age limit, NIWA? How old do you need to be to register their interest?
Pretty sure it's 16.
Right, so that's not too bad.
Yeah,
that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Let's put our attention back on yourself there, NIWA. And I'm very interested. I mentioned at the top of the show that 2023 has already been a really good year for you. Sure. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this is maybe your 14th year in the business. Is that about right?
It's hard to say, because I started training at 13 years old.
Oh, wow.
I'm 30 now, but
yeah,
I don't really count the first few years, because I mean, I started training at 13, had my very first match at 14, and then, but that was, I think I had 2 matches that year, and then I had 2 matches when I was 15, and then I started wrestling properly at 16. So
right, okay.
I don't know, I guess
so
somewhere around there, 14, 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So my question is, now, like I say, you've been in the business 14, 15 plus years, 30 years of age. How do you feel you are as a performer and as a talent? I mean, with all the experience, all the miles that you've traveled, all the countries you've been to, do you feel that this is the best version of NIWA that we've seen?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think if it wasn't, I don't know, I'd probably just stop wrestling, I think. I feel like you should get better every year, So I feel like this is the best it's been, but it's going to get better, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a picture that I neglected to bring up a bit earlier on, but I will do now. We spoke a bit about All Star and what a fantastic touring brand they are. Been around for 50 plus years, but here you are as the All Star British heavyweight champion and the All Star People's.
Got Mal Mason down in the corner there as well.
Exactly. Yes. What a legend! What an absolute legend! But I mean,
great guy.
Those are 2 championships that you hold very close to your heart. You don't hold any championships at the moment, but you were a double champ for All Star. Like I say, a company and 2 bouts there that are very, very special to you. What did it mean to represent All Star as a double champ at the time, then, NIWA?
It was pretty crazy, really. It didn't take very long. It was sort of, like I said, I started in 2019, late 2019 with All Star, and then I won those belts. I think it was maybe February. I think it was February 2020. So a few months in, really. But and I knew the history of, especially the yellow heavyweight title there. I knew guys like Fit Finley and stuff like that won it. Obviously, Joel had it when I won it. So it's pretty special.
Absolutely. A lot of
Yeah,
history, a lot of lineage behind them championships and the British heavyweight one in particular.
yeah,
But another highlight of yours from this year, I'm guessing, would have been this going over to Malta, Pro Wrestling Malta, for their spring edition. Pretty much a month to the day, and you fought their main man over there, Gianni Valletta, their hometown hero. And what a beast of a man! He is the wild man, of course, Gianni
yeah.
Valletta. How was that? Because I think that might have been another debut for you.
It was actually my first match outside of the UK. It was my first match
Right.
in Europe, so that was pretty exciting. Like it was pretty cool just to go over there, just go over to Malta really, and just see Malta, the country. Um, but also I'd met Gianni, or Wayne is his name,
Yeah.
in I think it was 2020. So I met him before COVID, so I've known him in a little while, and we've never wrestled. That was the first time we'd ever wrestled, so I was really excited for that, and I thought we had a pretty good match too. So it was really
Yeah.
intense, just like I said, the style that I like, you know. So I feel like we're
Yeah.
pretty similar in the ring, like and sort of similar characters and stuff. So it worked really well, and that crowd
Absolutely.
in Malta was crazy too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tell they
Yeah.
don't watch wrestling too much, you know. You can tell it's sort of special for them to watch wrestling because they'll go nuts.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I've had a few of the guys on that went over to Pro Wrestling Malta last summer, like
yeah,
Kian and Joel and Charlie and Nick, one or two others, and they said it was just such a special occasion. The fans were really into it and really kind of greeted them with open arms. But like I say, Gianni normally carries that chain to the ring with him as well, so you got to
yeah,
watch your
yeah,
head when he's got that. Pretty dangerous
yeah.
guy. It's certainly a promotion I'm guessing you'd like to go back to.
Definitely. Yeah, if they'll have me, I'll go back anytime, really. I want to go. I really want to go around Europe a bit more because, like I said, that was the first time I've been around. I w wouldn't mind wrestling in Germany or Italy, or I know a lot of the guys from here do go around Europe quite a bit, so I wouldn't mind doing that quite a bit, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a question that came through before we went live, Niwa, and from Richie, friend of the show. Are there any other promotions that you'd like to work for in the future? So don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you have your eye on any promotions in particular that you'd like to either work for or get back in with?
In the UK, you mean, or
Yeah, anywhere.
yeah. I've never wrestled for Rev Pro. I wouldn't mind going there. They've got a lot of good guys over there. Um, yeah, it's quite hard off the top of my head, to be fair.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you
I'll,
wrestled
I'll,
for
I'll,
some good promotions already, to be fair.
well, yeah, exactly. I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah,
So obviously, I'm open to anything, but I'm really happy with what I'm doing, and I'm pretty busy at the moment. I'm doing 2 or 3 shows a week most weeks, so
yeah.
sometimes more, sometimes less. But like for me at the moment, it's pretty good.
Oh, 100%. And
Yeah,
I'm intrigued to know about your wrestling fandom. I always ask this of my guests because it gives me great insight into kind of their influences and kind of the people that they fell in love with as kids or as teenagers. But when did your love for pro wrestling start? I'm guessing as a younger fan, Niwa?
yeah. It was just when I was young, just watching it on TV, wrestling in the backyard with my brothers and stuff like that. And then I started, well, like I said, I started quite young, 13. But before that, I went to a lot of live shows when I was young as well. There was just a local wrestling promotion that I ended up wrestling for, but they would wrestle at like, I grew up in Wellington, and there's a little town there called Lower Hutt. So that Lower Hutt Town Hall that have shows, and I'd be at school, and then someone would come in and just give like a wrestling poster and be like, "There's wrestling tonight at Lower Hutt Town Hall." So I'd take the poster home because no one else was really interested in it, just me. But I'd take the poster home, just ask my mum if she could take me down, and she'd take me down to the shows, and she'd just drop me off and just leave me. And I just go into the shows for 2 hours or whatever, and me and my brothers, and I'd watch those, and I'd start talking to the wrestlers or helping out with the ring or talking to the promoter, or just I just loved it,
Yeah.
obsessed with it. Yeah,
Yeah, and to be honest with you, certainly over here in the UK, we haven't got an awful lot of exposure to the scene over in New Zealand. I'm guessing that you're relatively in touch with it, and you were wrestling over there up until last year, I'm guessing. But what
yeah,
is
yeah.
the scene like over in New Zealand? Is it a growing scene? Is it a hot scene? Tell us a bit about it.
I think it's just like any scene, really. There's ups and downs. When I first started, it was pretty hot. Like they were getting big crowds in for the shows, and there's a lot of good wrestlers there and stuff. And then it kind of went down for a bit, and then went back up. But at the moment it's going really well. There's like probably 2 or 3 promotions in most cities, so in most major cities anyway. New Zealand's not a
Yeah.
big place though, so and
No.
wrestling's just not a it's not a well-known thing in New Zealand really, I guess, because well we got the All Blacks, like rugby's the main thing in New Zealand, so I think
Yeah.
it's kind of looked at a little bit like I don't know, not a joke, but it's just kind of just it's not really a mainstream thing, I guess, in New Zealand. A lot of people don't really
Yeah.
watch it, but
And it's the same for most countries, I suppose to a certain
yeah,
degree, it's the same for over here in the UK. It's not the number one sport, and
yeah, yeah, of
unless you grew up with it or have relatives that were into wrestling growing up, people don't take it as seriously as we do. But
course,
uh,
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to know that it's a growing scene. It sounds very similar to what we've got over here in the UK to a certain degree. But
It's
I mean,
similar, but it's just not as busy. Like that's the
yeah,
reason I left when I did leave was um just because you don't get to wrestle as much. I wrestled maybe once or twice a month for
yeah,
however many years I was there, so
yeah.
that's which is fine if you kind of just doing wrestling as a hobby, which is fine as well. But I really wanted to take it seriously and make it my job, so I knew I had to get out of there and just get the reps.
100%, and it looks like we're going to take a deep dive into that. But I mean, just I mentioned that we don't get a lot of exposure to the New Zealand scene, to the wrestling scene over in New Zealand. But when you think about some of the names that have come out of New Zealand, it'll probably remind you that it has kind of given birth to some incredible talents. And I've got a little bit of a list here, like Tony Garea, Pat O'Connor, current AEW stars Tony Storm and Jay White, WWE Hall of Famers, the Bushwhackers, of course, and we've recently had the loss of Bushwhacker Butch, of course. Dakota Kai, current WWE star and current Progress Tag Team Champion, or one half of the Progress Tag Team Champions, TK Cooper, and of course yourself. So that's not a bad list, is it really?
And there's a few more as well. I mean, there's
Go
Henare
ahead.
and New Japan. Bad Luck Fale, which is he's
Yes.
from. I mean, he's Tongan, but I think he was brought up in New Zealand. So, yeah, there's a lot of big stars. Especially, I think more recently there's been more New Zealand stars. Like there were the Bushwhackers before, but they were the only ones for a long time.
Yeah.
And then there was a big gap there. And then this sort of last maybe 10 or 15 years has been a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely, and they're all kind of, they're all at the top of their game,
Well, and
doing
all in
brilliant.
different parts of the world. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, 100%, 100%. So how did you you mentioned that you started training at 13, 14, you started having matches 15 and more so at the age of 16 and onwards. But when and how did you make the decision that you wanted to make that transition from being a fan to actually lacing up the boots, walking through them doors on day one and seeing how it went and actually
Well,
becoming part of the
I
business? Tell us about
always
it.
I always wanted to wrestle, so that was always the plan. It was just I thought I'd have to wait until I was 18 or 20 or something, but we'd just moved into a new house, and our next door neighbors were like an older couple, and their son was a wrestler, and they kept telling us about him, and they said eventually you'll meet him and all this sort of stuff. So maybe 3 or 4 months went by, and then we get a knock on the door one day. Like we're all just having dinner at home. We get a knock on the door, and I open up the door, and I didn't know what he looked like, but I just knew as soon as I opened the door, I knew it was him, the wrestler. His name was Chrome, and he brought over some 8x10s. He signed them for us, and he answered any questions we had. And then right at the end, when he was about to leave, he said, "Oh yeah, we're starting up a junior wrestling class, which you have to be 13 to start." And I just turned 13, so I was like real excited. And I think it cost like $120, and that was like they called it a lifetime fee. So you just had to pay $120, and you could just wrestle for life.
That's cool. That's not
Yeah, it
bad.
was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. So I just asked my mum for $120, and I think she just knew that I really wanted to do it. So she gave me $120, which is quite a lot of money, really. But she gave it to me, and I just started from there and just never stopped.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a guarantee that at least once during every episode of Wrestling with John, as I bring up one picture that might embarrass my guest, and it's a very young NIWA. Look at
Not
that.
too bad. That's when I first got to Mexico.
That's from Mexico, so
My
maybe this is
very
skipping ahead a little bit here, but
my very first match in Mexico. I think they told me to take that photo, so that's not too bad.
there
I'm
we
not too
go.
embarrassed by that.
But you probably would have been maybe. I mean, we're going to talk a bit more about New Zealand, but you probably in that picture would have been maybe, I don't know, late teens, early 20s.
You would think so. I'm actually 23 there.
Wow.
Yeah, I just look really young. I mean,
But Tommy, skipping back to New Zealand, and I know certainly from when you started having more regular matches, you were wrestling
yeah.
for NZWPW,
Yep.
and it was at North Island. Tell us a bit about that, because I think you wrestled for them for maybe a year or two.
I wrestled there
Being
maybe.
so young, I mean, that must have been quite an interesting experience for you on a massive learning curve. But you know, being so young in the business, you're kind of finding your feet and learning a lot about the business. What was that experience like?
That was so when I said I went to the Lower Hutt Town Hall to watch shows, that was NZWPW.
Ah,
So that's where I started, and I wrestled there for maybe close to 10 years, I'd say. Um, but yeah, so I watched all these wrestlers at the town hall, and then eventually I got to wrestle them all. So it was quite cool. So, um, but yeah, so that's where I started. I started training with a guy. He used to wrestle on a TV show that was called On the Mat, which was like, I guess similar to World of Sport. It was in the 80s and the 70s and 80s, I think, on New Zealand TV. And they had guys like Ric Flair and Andre the Giant come over and stuff like that. So they were affiliated with NWA. So they had they drew big crowds, and wrestling was popular then in New Zealand. But my trainer wrestled on those shows. His name was Martin Sterling. So he was the one that trained me, and he was the one that owned NZWPW.
yeah,
So yeah, it
yeah.
was really good to get in there with him.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that they looked after you and took you under their wing. And you know, you do hear some scary experiences of young trainees and some of the vets trying to dominate a little bit. But I mean, there was also a promotion that you worked with for a few years called IPW,
Yep.
based out of Wellington and Hamilton and Auckland. And I think you were in a tag team there called Project Mayhem. But it was also the place where you first bumped into, maybe met and started working with a certain TK Cooper. So I'm guessing that's where you kind of started your friendship with TK.
Well, I actually met him, I think, at New Zealand, NZWPW. I think he came down because I would go up to Auckland sometimes, and he would come down to Wellington, which is like, if you drive, it's 8 hours apart, and it's about an hour flight, but they're pretty much opposite ends of the North Island. So I think I met him at one of those shows, but yeah, that's where I sort of really, I guess, I started training with him and all that sort of stuff. In IPW, I moved up to Auckland when I was about 20, I think. When I turned 20, I just packed everything up and moved to Auckland because it just seemed like there was more opportunity up in Auckland to wrestle, and there's better shows, and they had better production value and all that sort of stuff. So it just seemed like a good move for me. So I moved up there, and then I started training with TK Cooper or Taz. Um, and yeah, it just I I don't know. So I started in WW, and that's where I started doing tours and stuff like that, and learning sort of I got my start in the business there and putting up rings and all that sort of stuff. And then when I moved to IPW was where it really started taking off for me in New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, it obviously opened a lot of people's eyes as to what you were doing there, what you were capable of, how fast you were progressing. Because in early 2016, you were off to Mexico, weren't you?
Yeah, yeah.
An incredible opportunity. You still would have been very young, like I say, early 20s. I think that photo we saw earlier was when you were 23, I think you said. So
23,
an
yeah, yeah.
incredible opportunity. How did that opportunity come about? I'm guessing that you just kind of worked for the right person or bumped into the right person that had those connections. But to
Not
tell us about
really.
it.
It wasn't really anything that was presented to me. It was just something I created myself, I guess.
Really?
I just literally, like I said with Auckland, I packed up everything and left. I just did the same thing there. I just packed up a little suitcase and a backpack and went to Mexico just
That's
on my own.
awesome.
Yeah, I just booked a one-way ticket because I knew that because in New Zealand, you're not really going to get spotted, I guess, by anyone, and no one's going to just fly you over anywhere, you know? So you have to kind of just do it on your own. And I knew that
Yeah.
TK had come over to England, and I'd seen that he did that, and I thought about following to England, but I thought, well, if I do that, I'm just another Kiwi over there, or So I thought I might just do my own thing and just see how it goes and go to Mexico. I was doing like a bit of a high flying sort of style at the time, so I thought that would suit. And just went over and started making connections. And but yeah, I just went over by myself at 23, and it was probably the best decision I've ever made.
So did you have a plan before you kind of got on boarded the plane to fly over to Mexico? Did you have a place to stay or somewhere to
No,
train, or did you just get there and just find your way around?
yeah, not really. I didn't really have a plan. That's kind of, I think people that know me would just sort of understand, but some people thought I was crazy, but I didn't really have a plan. I kind of just packed my bags and went and just hoped for the best, really. I mean, I showed up. I had, I sorted out a little tour, which was 3 days. So the day I
Right,
landed, it started. So it was a 3 day tour. And then from then on, I didn't have any plan or any other bookings. So, and I ended up staying there for 3 years. So,
that's incredible,
um,
isn't it?
yeah, it was just the life experience, obviously, because it's Mexico. It's crazy. It's a crazy place, you know. So I moved to Mexico City. Um, just a crazy culture shock, especially going
Yeah,
from New Zealand to Mexico. Just completely different worlds, really. But um, and then the wrestling itself as well was completely different. So it was good to learn that because I'd only know I'm really one style, which was the New Zealand sort of. I guess it's like an American style, like TV sort of wrestling. But
yeah.
and then I
Well, I
went
mean,
there to Mexico and
the style is crazy though, because I mean, I saw just looking at your kind of track record over in Mexico that you were involved in. I think nearly all of your matches were multi-man matches, mostly kind
yeah.
of like four ways, five ways, multi-man tag matches, a lot of 2 out of 3 falls matches. But it's the pace, the craziness of that style. You described yourself a moment ago as a bit of a high flyer, but I bet you couldn't imagine how different and how kind of much how different the pace was compared to what you.
Yeah, um, it was like I don't know. Well, I guess I did consider myself a high flyer, but then when I got there, I tried to do that stuff, and they sort of told me like, I don't think you should do that because you can't really do it as good as us, which is fair enough because I couldn't. So I started sort of trying to develop my own style, I guess, and I didn't really, it's not where it is now, but I guess started trying to uh, go in the same direction I am now, I guess. I started
Yeah,
working towards that back then. Um, but yeah, it's only really sort of my style's only really come together in the last probably 3 or 4 years. But there, I was still pretty green, really. I'd only had about 300 or 400 matches when I got to Mexico. But like you said, it was all 6 man tag matches and 2 out of 3 falls. I think the whole time I was there for 3 years, I had 2 singles matches the entire time. So it was definitely different, like doing all the 6 man tags. But I learned so much being there, and just the biggest thing was wrestling in front of huge crowds because
well,
I
I
went
was going to
from
ask. Yeah, I mean CMLL, one of the
yeah, yeah,
biggest, if not the biggest, promotion in Mexico. I mean, when you think of Mexican lucha libre, Mexican wrestling, you think of AAA, and you think of CMLL, and they're kind of like number one and two. You know, it's interchangeable on any given week, to be honest with you, as to which is the number one or two company. But they're pretty much neck and neck as the biggest in Mexico, anyway. I mean, that's a huge opportunity. Being, probably would have been only in Mexico a few months before you started working for CMLL. How did that opportunity arise? And like I say, huge crowds, a fantastic opportunity.
so I started, like I said, I started with that 3 day tour, and that company was called DTU.
Yes.
Um, so I started there, and the promoter really liked me, and he got a CMLL wrestler on for a show, and I just went up to the CMLL guy and just asked, could you watch my match? And that was it, really. I just asked him if he could watch my match, and got some advice from him afterwards, and he gave me some advice, and then he said he's going to put me forward to CMLL, and I started training at Arena Mexico, and didn't. I mean, obviously, I wanted to wrestle for CMLL, but I didn't think a lot of it. I just went to training, and then they had this big show coming up, and all I had was a 6 month visa. So at the end of the 6 months, I would have had to go home. But on the fifth month, they came up to me at the end of one of the trainings and just said they asked me where I was from, and they needed like different people from different countries for this one show. It was like a Mexico versus the rest of the world show. So there was a Mexican team, which was about, I think it was 7 versus 7 or something like that. And they needed, yeah, like I said, they just needed guys from America and wherever else they could find them, really. So I was just in the right place at the right time, and they used me for that show, and then they extended my visa for another year, and that was it. It just took off from there. So I started wrestling in Arena Mexico, and before that, it was just all indie shows, wrestling in front of a few hundred people, or in New Zealand, it was wrestling in front of 2 or 300 people, but I got to wrestle in Arena Mexico, which was 16,500 people. So it was
Crazy,
a crazy,
absolutely
crazy
crazy.
jump to go from 200 to 16,000. But yeah, and
And
I don't know if I was even ready for it really. I mean,
well, I was going to ask. I mean,
yeah,
going out in
yeah,
front of 16,000 people, Arena Mexico. Did that? That takes a lot of adjustment, doesn't it? Really, especially when
that
you're
was,
stepping out for the first time.
yeah, I was really nervous before that one, like really nervous. Just couldn't believe it. But as soon as I got in the ring, it was kind of like any other show, really. I feel like that's just any show, you go out, well, you feel nervous beforehand, and then you get through
Yeah,
the curtain and you get into the ring and you feel normal. But yeah, that was really crazy. Just the crowds over there are just, it's hard to explain, really. Just
they're very
insane.
passionate, aren't they? Very
Yeah,
passionate.
very passionate, especially when it's Mexico versus another country. It's just, yeah, it's insane. They
And I'm
throw
guessing
beer
that,
and
did you play
yeah.
the bad guy, the villain, the heel? I'm guessing in most of your
No,
matches.
I was actually a babyface a lot
Oh,
over
okay.
there. Yeah, yeah. I eventually turned heel, but yeah, I was babyface to start off with because I was so
Oh,
young and I looked really young and
fresh faced, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it worked.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, being in somewhere like Mexico, completely different culture,
Yeah.
language. We've mentioned about the wrestling style and everything. Did you bond with any of the guys out there? You were out there for nearly 3 years, you said, and probably bouncing around with the same guys week in, week out. But were there? Did you have any road buddies, any travel companions?
Yeah, well, because there was a lot of guys that came over from New Japan and stuff like that, and when I first got there, I didn't speak Spanish. I knew the basics because I'd learnt a little bit before I got there, so I could say hello and yes and no, and that was about it. But so I'd really hang out with a lot of the foreigners, like Americans and guys that came over from Japan. Um, so I had a tag team partner from America. I don't know if you know Sam Adonis.
Yes.
I don't know
Yep.
if you, yeah, yeah, yeah. He's quite well known in America and Mexico. He wrestles for AAA now, but we were tag team partners in Mexico, and he lived there as well. So we would hang out a lot, and then I hung out with guys like Tama Tonga or Michael Elgin or Juice Robinson, and there was a lot of guys that came over. So it was good when the Americans came over because we'd just hang out, and I mean we'd go on long bus rides, like 8 hour bus rides to shows and 8 hours back. So you get a lot of time to hang out and train together and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Have a few
absolutely.
beers. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And what were your own personal highlights from your time over in Mexico? Because obviously it was a very fundamental time in your career. You were very young when you went over there, and 3 years, is a long time. And what do you think were your kind of personal highlights?
Um, I think the whole time was just a highlight, really. I mean, I just loved every second of it. Because I'd never really done anything like that before. I'd never just packed up and just gone. So it was a huge adventure, really, just going over there and not really knowing what's going to happen. That was the best part about it, I think, was just not really knowing what's going to happen and just seeing what happens, really. I mean, but the highlight for me was definitely wrestling in Arena Mexico because I mean that's got a lot of history and CMLL itself has a lot of history because it's been running for I'm not sure what it is now. When I was there, I think it was 80 something years. I can't remember, but
Oh,
it's a long. I think it's the longest running promotion in the world. So, um, but also getting to wrestle Mexican wrestling legends like Negro Casas, Ultimo Guerrero, Blue Panther, Mystico. So I got to wrestle all these big names, and I don't know, at 23, it was a huge shock. But and like I said, I don't know if I was ready for it. Like if I feel like if I went now, it would be a different story. But at that time, like I said, I didn't have a lot of experience, so it
yeah.
was really hard at the time, and I enjoyed it, and I learned so much when I was there. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm probably digging quite deep here, but when you're in there, especially in your first year or so in Mexico, obviously was there a language barrier between yourself
for
and the
sure.
Mexicans?
Yeah,
So I
because
mean, did that affect your matches at all?
well, a lot of them didn't speak English at all, or
Mm,
if they did, it was just very little. But no, it didn't affect the matches at all. But I eventually learned probably maybe a year in, I was speaking pretty good Spanish.
yeah,
I don't remember it all now, but I feel like if someone spoke to me now, I'd be able to speak to them back. But
yeah,
I haven't spoken it since I left, so I left in 2018, so I haven't spoken in a few years.
yeah.
But yeah, it took a little while to get used to it. It was just, I think it was more confidence and stuff. I was pretty shy when I got there, so it was hard for me to come out and try and learn it. But once I got over that, I was fine.
And of course, wrestling, has a language all of its own, doesn't it? So,
Yeah, exactly.
and my final question regarding Mexico, and obviously you left there in 2018, having
Yeah.
spent 3 years. But what are there any kind of like fundamentals that you learned over there that you maybe took with you for your future career? And like I say, soon after Mexico, you came over to Europe and the UK, and like I say, still doing tremendous things in 2023. But is there anything from your Mexican experience that you still kind of utilize or carry with you today?
I think the main thing that I carry from there is presence. So it's not really anything in the ring. It's more just the way you carry yourself, I guess, because you have to when the crowds are that big, 16,000, or the smaller arenas with 5,000, you have to have a presence about you, I guess, because there's so many people in the venue, and there's people all the way up the top, or there's so they need to be able to see what you're doing, and they need to be able to sort of, I mean, if there's someone way up in the top seats, they need to be able to sort of know who you are, I guess. But it's quite hard because obviously the ring's quite small, and you look quite small as well to them, but you
Yeah,
still need to be able to project to a large audience. So I feel like I took that the most from Mexico,
yeah,
and also
100%.
just they're they do a lot of mat wrestling, so I took a lot of that from there as well. So I don't do a lot of mat wrestling now, but I feel like if I needed to, I could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And you mentioned earlier that when you went over to Mexico, TK came over to the UK, and you followed him a little while later.
yeah, yeah.
What was the main kind of thought process behind coming to the UK in particular? Was it just to kind of that natural progression in terms of the UK style, the UK scene, the busyness? And of course, 2018, 2019, the UK was probably the hottest independent scene in the world as well.
It was actually talking to Sam Adonis because he was over here before he came to Mexico. So he would tell me about All Star, and he told me about James Mason and Oliver Gray, which is Joel. Um, and he would just talk about these guys like he said James Mason was the best wrestler he's ever wrestled. Um, and I didn't know who James Mason was. But I just remember hearing his stories, and it just sounded like a lot of fun. And I knew I wanted to learn more as well because I learned a lot in Mexico, but I was not getting bored of Mexico, but I just felt like I was sort of staying in the same place, and I wanted to move on and learn some more. It sounded like I could learn a lot more from guys like James and Joel, and but also like you said, the UK scene was quite hot, so I
Yeah.
was keeping up with it when I was in Mexico. I'd keep up with it online and stuff, and just see what was happening over here, and it just felt like the right time to move over, really. So I just went for it, like same with Mexico. I just packed up everything and left. So
Yeah,
didn't think too
yeah.
much about it, really. Just went.
Yeah, and sticking with 2018, maybe going into early 2019, but you wrestled for promotion like Attack Pro Wrestling,
Yeah.
the Knights over in Norwich, WAW, nothing but wrestling, and Kamikaze over in the West Midlands. So you kind of branched out a bit and touched quite a few different promotions almost instantly. How did you find the UK scene within your first 6 months or so? Was it a lot of fun? Did it take a little bit of getting used to?
Yeah, it took a little while because it just I don't know. I guess when you're new anywhere, really, it just takes a little while to get used to it. But I struggled a little bit, really, just to get bookings and stuff. Like I'd have maybe three, and then the next week I'd have nothing, and so it took a little while to get going. But once I eventually did, it yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And full transparency here, you came onto my radar in 2019 when you started
Yeah.
performing for a company that I'm very close to and associated with is Progress. And like I say, I think your first match was a dark match against Sugar Dunkerton. I think you had
Yeah.
solo matches against Ricky Shane Page, and then you teamed with TK on occasions as well. So that's kind of when you fell onto my radar, and I think you possibly fell into
Were you at
certainly.
those shows, or you just saw it online, or?
I was at the one in the Birmingham O2 Academy, and I think you
Okay,
were
yeah, yeah.
involved in
Six man,
a
I think it was.
six-man tag,
Yeah, yeah.
and that was absolutely fantastic. Featured yourself and TK, but that was kind of the first match where I saw you in the flesh, and was thinking, "Great, what's this guy all about?" And TK Cooper as well, and to see what you've both gone on and done, but some good exposure for yourself there in front of probably one of the biggest and best indie promotions in the UK at the time. So good exposure. How did you find your Progress run back in 2019?
I enjoyed it. It was fun. Definitely different to what I'd been doing before that. I mean, I think I was doing a lot of family shows before that, so it was definitely different. But yeah, it was good to get in there with guys like Jordan Devlin and guys like that. I think I only did about maybe 4 or 5 shows for them, and then COVID hit, so I didn't really go
Yeah.
back. And I haven't really been in contact with them lately, but I wouldn't mind going back. That'd be pretty fun.
Who knows? Who knows? I think you're
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
well suited for that promotion. And 2019 also happens to be, correct me if I'm wrong, but it also happens to be the year, I believe, when you first got in the ring with Joel Redman at EVW in Gloucester. And obviously a guy that you know very well today, guy that you work
Yeah.
very closely with and have had many, many matches with since. But obviously, even in 2019, he was a UK legend. Would have been a few years removed from his WWE run. But what do you remember about that first encounter?
Well, it wasn't the first time I met Joel though. It was I met him a year before that, but I don't know if he
Right.
remembers it. But so I met him at a show in Bristol. He was wrestling Charlie Sterling, and I was just in a four-way. Um, but yeah, that was the first time I ever met him. He probably doesn't remember it, but and then I wrestled him in Gloucester. Um, I can't really remember the match to be fair, but yeah, I can't actually remember what we did or anything. But um, he seemed to like it. So
Yeah,
there he is.
and I mean, obviously, you've wrestled him many times since. He's a traditional British wrestler through and through, but he can bring in that
Yeah,
intensity and that different style every
definitely.
so often. He can switch it up. What's he like to be in the ring with? Because I've seen him wrestle many, many times, and he's as smooth as any worker in the world. He's just a pro's pro. But what's
Yeah.
he actually like to be in the ring with, NIWA?
Well, I think he brought that intensity out of me. It wasn't really there before I'd wrestled Joel. So um, I felt like it was, well, I felt like it was slightly there, but it just needed to really come out. And when I wrestled Joel, I just turned it up a bit. And from then on, it sort of just, every match would get a bit more intense. And that's how it really went, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like I say, Joel Redman, I've said it many, many times on this podcast. Probably I think inside the top one or two best pros in the UK, without a doubt.
I think to be honest, I think in the world.
Really, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think so. Yeah.
I'd have to agree
My
with that.
opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah.
And although I think Joel plays a very good babyface,
Mm,
when you see him play heel, he's an even better heel, surprisingly
yeah.
good heel,
Really
because you
good.
don't expect it from him. And we've got one or two people that are watching live at home. Vaughan Vertigo. Hey, Vaughan, thanks for tuning in, NIWA. So love to get Vaughan on the show one day. It's
I
got to
wrestled.
happen. Go on.
I wrestled Vaughan and it's called, I think it was Huntingdon maybe, for Southwest. Oh wait, not Southwest, Southside, Southside.
Yep.
That's it. Yeah, Southside Wrestling. A few years ago before COVID. But yeah, I've
Top
known
guy.
Vaughan a little while. Yeah,
Top
good
guy.
guy.
And let's have a look. Some other questions that came through before we went live. Let's just bring them up. Here we go. So Friend of the show, Richie, sent in a couple of questions. This is his second. What are your goals for the remainder of 2023? If you have any goals, and if they're secret goals, you don't have to tell us, but any that you can.
No real goals outside of just getting better every match, I guess. That's kind of as far as it goes. I don't really have any like titles I want to win or anything like that. It's more just having better matches every show is the main goal, really, and just getting better. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, NIWA, in a minute, I'm going to be asking you for your socials, where my followers and people that are watching at home can reach out and say hi. But before we do, I need to first of all tell my viewers and listeners out there who I've got as my next guest. But I'm also going to announce my entire lineup for May. So first of all, my next guest on the Wrestling with John's podcast is actually going to be in 2 days' time. I've got RP Davies, RPD, coming on the show on Thursday the 27th. Not only is he the TNT Ignition champion up in Liverpool, but I think over the weekend, Saturday, he won the Odyssey Pro Wrestling Heavyweight Championship. So that's RP Davies coming on the show in 2 days' time. An awesome guest. Now, let me just queue up some... here we go. So my first guest of May, and this is going to be somebody that NIWA might be familiar with, but it's going to be Toby Valentine coming on the show next Monday the 1st of May. An awesome young talent. I've been keeping my eye on Toby for a little while now. Just seems to get better and better and better. And I think he's actually going to be facing the SWW champion in Exmouth the 20th of May coming up for Chris Bronson's championship. So a pretty strong talent there, wouldn't you say, NIWA?
100%. Yeah, I really want to wrestle Toby. I don't know him too well, but I've seen him around and stuff, and I only really heard of him when I got back. I don't know if he was wrestling before COVID. He might have been, but I've really started seeing him around on posters and shows and stuff like that. So
yeah, such an awesome talent.
Yeah.
Speaking of an awesome talent that's doing really good things, got Harrison Leon coming on the show. And next week, actually, is going to be a busy week for me. I've got Toby Valentine on the Monday. I've got Harrison Leon on Wednesday, the 3rd of May. The freshest, the flyest, the finest Harrison Leon will be coming onto the Wrestling with Jonas podcast next Wednesday, the 3rd at 8 p.m. sharp, as always. And then on Friday, my third live podcast of the week, I've got the promoter of Immortal Wrestling, based where I live in Westbury in Suffolk, coming onto the show to talk about his next show, Immortal Combat, which is happening from the Venom nightclub on Saturday the 27th of May. And that's going to be Jay White, not the AEW Jay White, but promoter of Immortal Wrestling Jay White, coming on the show on Friday the 5th. And then I've got this guy here, Callum Newman, coming on to the Wrestling with Jonas podcast. Callum's going to be joining me as a live guest on Wednesday, the 10th of May. So just a couple of Wednesdays around the corner, 8 p.m. sharp UK time. One of the best UK talents. I've seen him recently in a Progress Ring, seen him quite a few times in 2023. Is Callum a talent that you're familiar with, NIWA?
Yeah, I've seen him before. I've never wrestled him. I think I saw him the first time was on a Frontline show. With the company that Osprey was running.
Yeah.
Young quite a young guy, isn't he?
The Prince of Pace.
Yeah.
And if ever you've seen him in the ring, you know exactly why he's called the Prince of Pace.
Yeah, he's quick.
Absolutely. Well, I've got 5 interviews in the month of May, and the 5th one, I've got this individual here, Nina Samuels, coming on for episode 300. She's going to be my guest for episode 300. Now, let me just bring up the little banner here, because Nina will be joining me live on the Wrestling with Jonas podcast Monday, the 15th of May, 8 p.m. sharp, to celebrate episode 300. And it's a milestone occasion, a milestone episode, and you couldn't wish for as a greater guest as Nina Samuels coming on to the Wrestling with Jonas podcast. She will be gracing us with her presence on Wednesday the 15th. I think it's Wednesday the 15th. I'll just bring it up one more time. Monday the 15th, my apologies. But and that's all 5 interviews in the month of May done before the 15th, because the back end of May I'll be doing a lot of recordings for Progress in the lead up to their Super Strong Style 16 tournament on the 27th, 28th and 29th of May. So lots of fun to be had on the Wrestling with Jonas podcast. If you're not already subscribed, please hit that follow or subscribe button, because you will not regret it. Lots of cool interviews, including my guest today, NIWA. But NIWA, just kind of looking looking at your career. And we've touched on quite a few highlights and quite a few moments of your awesome 14, 15 years in the business. And in many people's estimations, it's just getting started because you're at the peak of your career and really, really getting going. But are there any other kind of highlights or moments that you're particularly proud of from your career so far?
Not that you haven't touched over, really. I mean, the biggest, obviously, is just Mexico and the UK. I mean, I've just gotten so much better in the last, I think it's 5 or 6 years altogether. But yeah, just being able to wrestle the guys that I've wrestled over here and stuff, it's just been amazing, really. But yeah, been really good, man.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, we'd love to find out where we can reach out to you to get all of your socials. So I do have a little ticker that's going to be running along the bottom of the screen. But if any of my followers or fans want to get in touch, say hi, learn more about NIWA, where can they do so, my friend?
For social media?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's mostly Instagram and Facebook. I don't really use Twitter, but Instagram is NIWA_pro. And Facebook is NIWA PW.
There we go. But you do have a presence all over social media.
I haven't been on Twitter in probably 6 months or 8 months or something. So
I don't blame you, my friend. I don't touch it very much
yeah,
myself. I go on there, I promote, and I come off again.
Yeah, every time I go on there, there's just something I don't really like. So
yeah, I try to avoid it. But Instagram, Facebook, yeah, absolutely. Twitter, only when I have to. But NIWA, you've been awesome, my friend. One thing I like to do with all of my guests is ask them for a closing message from NIWA. So if there's anything you'd like to say, just to kind of close this interview for your followers, your supporters, your friends and family out there, maybe we can have a closing message from NIWA.
Just thank you, really. Thanks for all the support. I mean, it's been 15 years and it's been a great 15 years in wrestling. So I just want to say thanks for everyone supporting me and coming to the shows and getting behind me as well. It's been great.
Excellent. But NIWA, you've been an awesome guest for episode 294, and we'll see you at the shows, my friend. Catch you soon.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Cheers. The following podcast